Hello and welcome to another Victoria 3 video. This time we're going to be talking about the comments and the reaction to the latest dev diary, that being on the concept of war and the shocking news that the crackpot theory is correct. Or overarching terms correct, right? The Crackpot Theory video, the One Power Bavarian put out back in, I believe, May, he also included a kind of theory crafting mechanics, and obviously that is almost certainly going to be wrong. We don't know for sure yet, but it's almost certainly going to be wrong because that's just the way of things. But the overall theme of the thing, I do believe, is, I think it's accurate to say that it was correct. So, yeah, that was the shocking news that broke, and my own video on it was relatively negative, right? I still am unhappy about the change. I am less unhappy than I was when I made the video on Wednesday evening. It has been. Well, I got access to the dev diary about 24 hours before it went live, and so I had that amount of time, and also it is now about 30 hours after the dev diary went live, so I've had a bit of time to sit and think and be, mull over my thoughts and kind of explore why I was unhappy, let's say. But let's talk about all of that after I've gone through the comments, the developer responses, and all of that. But first, the first thing I want to go over is a couple of comments that I found in the community before the crackpot theory turned out to be true, and they're both positive and negative about the crackpot theory. This is before the dev diary came out. People are like, oh, I want the crackpot, I don't want the crackpot. So this one first. No crackpot theory, please. Just borrow from CK3 and Hearts of Iron 4 and Stellaris and polish it up. Don't take away my mini wargaming love. I feel you, buddy. I feel you. Spicy take. Vic 2 Warfare is good and only needs front lines and better army management. This is something I very much agree with. I think Victoria 2's combat is very, very good. There's some certainly big issues with it, those being mostly UI and UX things, an army manager, template designer, better hotkeys, less lag when clicking units, and dragging things in and out. Army templates, basically, would be, like, the best thing. Adding in a basic frontline system would also be pretty cool for it. And also scrap the general system and make it better. But yeah, Vic 2 combat is unironically incredibly good and rewarding and fun if you can look past the UI. I believe quite strongly that when most people say Vic 2 combat was shit, what they mean is they don't like the element of constructing armies, because, yeah, that's pretty shit. They don't like having to sort out mobilization stacks, because, yeah, that's pretty shit too. But all of that can be fixed with some things that have been added with, games that came out in the future. The macro builder, for example. But yeah, I agree with Otto von Waffle here, and apparently so did a lot of people, because he got 42 upvotes at the time I took this picture. So, moving on. This seems to further confirm that Warfare will be a lot different to other Paradox games. This is talking about the Twitter teaser that Martin put up. With CK3 and Imperative, they talked about units and warfare very early on, and just acted as if it was a given that we would be moving units around on provinces. With Vic 3, they haven't shown any units, or even mentioned warfare at all. Call me crazy, but I don't think we'll be moving pieces around anymore. And again, this was taken before the dev diary was released, so good job, you nailed it. There was a guy who also decided to put his Reddit account up for grabs, I guess. Post here if you feel confident enough in your prediction about the crackpot theory to bet your account against it. I'll eat a ban until the game comes out if crackpot theory is even remotely close to correct. Enjoy your ban. See you, new seal. Enjoy your ban. There's going to be a big change, but not this. Obviously, they're trying something new for announcement this big, but the crackpot is too risky even for Victoria 3. Evidently not. Evidently not. Crackpot theory is a load of horse shit and always was. No credibility. I literally debunked it the day one true Bavarian uploaded it. This was in the previous thread that I was just talking about, where the guy was promising to have himself banned. So you'll accept a ban if you're wrong? You're that confident? Yes. And also, I like this. How do you debunk an idea? Well, in this specific case, one true Bavarian's whole theory was based on his assumption of what strategic areas meant, thinking they must be linked with military and similar in some way to, for example, Hearts of Iron 4's air zones, but for the whole military. Okay, that's a fair point, right? We now know what strategic regions are. It isn't actually fully debunked, though, because while strategic regions are used for the countries to say, I kind of have an interest in this area, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's all they're used for. It could very much be a military thing as well. But anyway, in any case, we didn't know about that until months after the video came out. And this guy debunked one true Bavarian the day he uploaded it. I think you're a liar there, sir. But anyway, he pointed out to him, and apparently one true Bavarian realized and agreed immediately that it was not with that, but instead to do with Vic 3's no localized infamy system, which is now confirmed. So there was no basis left for his claim, and it seemed extremely unlikely in the first place. Well, I mean, there was no way to know about the infamy system or the localized infamy system or anything of the sort. So, I mean, I debunked is definitely off the table. You didn't do that. Yeah, I mean, that's it. I bet my account that it isn't true. I see 0 scenarios where you can't move your own armies around. This is the -1 scenario, then, I guess. There is absolutely no way that the crackpot theory is correct. Sure. Alright, well, that's it. That's it for those. We've got more community comments, but these will be post-Dev Diary comments that I'll be releasing. But for now, let's have a look at the Dev Diary itself and some of the responses that we see on there. So, first of all, I was wrong. I was wrong. I expected the amount of disagrees on this Dev Diary to be much, much higher than they are. I expected the amount of disagrees to be around about double the agrees. So if we're going to add these all together, we're looking at around, just round it up, it's probably over 900. It's probably, let's call it like 1,000. And then 223 disagree. So we're looking at about a 5-to-1 agree to disagree ratio. Of course, the forums aren't everything, right? There are people who disagree with this who are not on the forums. There are people who agree with this who are not on the forums. So this isn't comprehensive, but it's a decent enough slice of the community to kind of infer what the general feeling is. And yeah, I was wrong. I did not call it. And I am very surprised that I was wrong, but hands up, I was wrong, you know? So, there's that. The community sentiment is, for the most part, I mean, I wouldn't say overwhelmingly, right? Overwhelmingly, to me, is like, 90% plus, right? It is comprehensively, but not overwhelmingly positive. But anyway, let's have a look at the dev comments, because there are some very interesting things that have been responded to in this dev diary. Can a war end up with white peace? If it is costly, as it should be, I might want to end it soon as I can, without even pushing my main demand. Yes, and wars can also end in negotiated peaces, with both sides taking and losing things. Excuse me, what? This in a comment? Why is this in a comment? This should have been in the dev diary. Because that's insane. That's amazing. I have been well, I mean, I'm not the only one. I should say the community, the people who play Paradox games, especially EU4, have been asking for negotiated pieces where both sides gain and both sides lose. And the only game we've had it really is in Stellaris. But that's just you keep what you have sieged. This is like a literal negotiated peace. So we could see things like, okay, I get the land, but then I'll pay you for it, right? It's what the Americans did to the Mexicans in the Mexican-American War when they took California and a shit ton of land. They took the land, but they also gave money to the Mexicans. The amount of money was, let's just say, insulting, but it was to just, I guess, I've heard theories that it was to justify the war somewhat, to being a purchase instead of just pure imperialistic conquest, because America didn't really like seeing themselves as imperialist, which they absolutely were. But yeah, no, the negotiated peace, that's fucking amazing. Like, there are things that I still dislike about the dev diary, but there's nothing to disagree with here so far. Negotiated peace is a huge deal, and to just have it in a comment, my god. I think, honestly, before we go on, I think that is the biggest problem with this dev diary. As much as I disagree with the direction and removing this manual control of armies, right? I'm still negative on that. I'm not sold on it because we don't know any information about it, right? As much as I could be much more negative, right? I could be swearing and stupid decision, blah, 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 right? As much as I could feel that way, right? The biggest mistake in this dev diary isn't the contents of it and saying that the warfare is going to change rapidly, right? The biggest problem is that they didn't give an alternative. All that has been said so far is that things are being taken away. Things are being changed from what the norm is, and not giving any kind of indication of what it's changing to, I still maintain is a huge mistake. And yeah, I mean, this could have been in there. That'd have lightened the blow for the people who dislike this, for sure. Hopefully the AI is leaps and bounds ahead of all other Paradox titles by a significant margin if I'm not controlling my own units. So this guy has the mistaken impression that units and all that still exist as we already know them, but the AI is just controlling them for you. And it's not the case. An important thing to note that in Victoria 3, the warfare system isn't built around AI having to control the sort of tactical moment-to-moment decisions that you'd normally be doing as a player. So it isn't just units on the map with AI maneuvering around and potentially making foolish decisions. Everything is built from the ground up towards a more strategic form of warfare where the blunders and moments of brilliance are strategic rather than tactical. You can still have a considerable degree of agency in the outcome of your wars, just the decisions you make are different to our other games. Fair enough. Moving armies around in the other games isn't strategic. Sorry, it isn't tactical. It is strategic, right? Maneuvering armies is strategic. There's no way to argue against that. Tactical would be if we loaded up fucking Total War Empire or something to move individual units on a map. So, I mean, I understand where this strategic versus tactical idea is coming from. It's just wrong. But I kind of understand it, so I'm just going to leave it at that. So, the Crackpot theory was correct. What are provinces for, then? Provinces still play an important role in warfare, still, as control over them is what determines the course of front lines and the war, but more on this in the coming weeks. So it's hard, right? Because there's no information, right? But this kind of leads me to believe that we're still going to see, like the striped lines when an area is occupied. I'm kind of thinking we're seeing something like that still. That would make sense to me if that would still exist, and that's how front lines and such are being shown. But I really hope there's some more visual indication of warfare than those striped lines, because that won't be enough for me, I don't think. Visuals are really important, and I hope we get some good ones. Wars that are ongoing at the start of the game, like the Carlist War, will always have the same outcome since all the preparation decisions have already been made. So the aim is definitely not for wars to just be deterministic based on certain conditions. No. What does that even mean? What are we getting from that? Well, what we're getting from that is that there's going to be more to war than just the starting conditions. Just having the troops in the right place, just having the logistics, just having the resources. Although the fact that there is no stockpiling of military resources and yet we're getting this strategic style of warfare is very odd to me, because stockpiling your military goods sort of seems like it would fit quite nicely into this kind of system, but apparently not. But yeah, war not being deterministic based on starting conditions is good, right? It's good. That's one of the worries that people had, is that you would have situations where the only kind of preparation you made for a war is just making sure you are set up and ready to go, and then you click the war button, which doesn't exist because it's a diplomatic play now. But you go through the diplomatic play, you enter war, and from then on, there's nothing to do. Everything is sorted because you did your preparation already. And of course, if that is the image that people are having about this, then of course it's going to be negative. Hopefully that is not the case, and it doesn't seem to be the case based on this comment. It would be nice to have any details or screenshot other than it won't be manual. 100% agree. 100% agree. People will just have to speculate over and over without being given specifics. Again, totally agree. Will the next Dev Diaries cover more about war, or is that too far? So the next Dev Diaries we're going into detail on the mechanics of warfare, yes. For this one, we wanted to focus on the overall vision to explain our reasoning behind the departure from how warfare works in our other games. I still maintain this was a mistake, and a big one at that. Like a huge mistake. Again, as much as I may think that the change itself was a mistake, the way this Dev Diary was written is the biggest mistake. A change like this can be made without, insulting the fan base is too far. But I'm struggling to find the words. There would be far less backlash if there was next week's Dev Diary was rolled into this one. Hell, even if we'd had a week off, a week break, and then come back with a bigger Dev Diary, that would have been better than this. There are some more dev comments. There are not just these ones, and we'll go over them now. I found these on Discord. The Discord community for Viggy 3 has been pretty active, quite nicely active. But first off, there is this comment from the forums as well, just on another thread. So, Wiz specifically said that wars are not predetermined by starting conditions, the comment that we've just read, with the caveat that it of course depends on the war. If a player Luxembourg with 5,000 soldiers tries to stand alone against the German Empire with hundreds of thousands of soldiers on its border, fails to secure any help from other countries and still refuses to back down in the diplomatic play, there isn't really any realistic path to victory for them. But that's an extreme example, and most wars shouldn't be like that, especially since backing down in diplomatic plays exists as a way to diplomatically resolve completely lopsided conflicts. The example I was replying to was the Carlist Rebellion, where I definitely don't think it should just be a predetermined that the Carlists lose. Yeah, good. It shouldn't be predetermined. Anyway, more dev comments. These ones are from the Discord. This one is from Paul Dupre, the only member of the Victoria 3 development team with an economics degree, which clearly makes his opinions that much more superior. there will be plenty of ways to command, interact, and affect your military efforts. The fact that those aren't shown in individual units you click across the map is all you know at the moment. I will happily hear your feedback and constructive criticisms when you know more soon. This is like mostly a fair point, right? And I think this goes two ways, right? There has been on the forums, on Reddit, on Discord, an awful lot of unbridled praise, of massive like fawning, and gonna be honest, there's been a bit of fanboying, right? And I don't know how much of it is justified, right? Part of this is obviously me being on the negative side, but I'm trying to look at this from a neutral perspective. The fact, like, literally all we know right now is that you won't be able to directly command your units on a map. The only way that is celebratory worthy is if you don't like moving units on a map. There isn't anything else. There is one other thing, and that is applauding the, I guess, bravery to make such a radical change in the Paradox formula, right? Those are the two things that are worthy of praise or worthy of celebration or whatever, right? And the amount of praise I'm seeing, it doesn't track. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, this is an amazing change. This is an absolutely phenomenal thing that, you know, but how do you know that? How do you know that? You don't know anything yet. So how can you say so confidently that this is an amazing change? You literally can't. You literally can't. So it's very much irritating me to see that kind of thing. On the other hand, I think that there are a lot of people being incredibly doomer over the toply. You know what I mean? They're going way too far with their doomerism, right? My own position is I'm disappointed about the change, but I'm willing to hear it out and see what the change is before I write it off. That's my own position. And I think that is probably the most fair position, other than, you know, somebody who is completely detached and is just a wait and see, right? There's no positive or negative. The most logical thing is just, we don't know anything, we'll wait and see. But, you know, people aren't robots. People aren't logical beings, so that's not really the case for the vast majority, right? So yeah, that's kind of where I stand. But I do think the people who are disappointed that something they enjoy in the Paradox formula is not going to be there, I think that's justified. I think the people who are disappointed in that are justified in feeling that way. And yeah, I am one of those people, so I guess, of course, I feel that my own position is justified. But again, trying to look at this from a neutral perspective, surely people who are positive about this change can also see that, right? I'm not crazy. Anyway, moving on again, there's more, there's a lot more, and we actually want to get through this, don't we? I'm talking about wars being profitable in economics. If you want a how guerrilla warfare works in Victoria 3, spoilers, but it can be simulated. So, yeah, we're going to get guerrilla warfare in Victoria 3. That's another thing that this system is apparently going to be able to simulate, and that's great. It's not something that we ever were able to have before. So, yeah, fantastic. Guerrilla warfare was just not a thing in any other Paradox game. I guess maybe Hearts of Iron with, like, that rebellion layer, but I don't know enough about Hearts of Iron to really say. So I don't know. But it's interesting. It's interesting stuff. That's all I've got for the dev comments, right? That's all I've got for the dev comments. But I do have some comments still from Discord that I want, and from Reddit that I want to share. This is all post-dev diary. Everything from now on is post-dev diary, and including those dev comments, I guess. So, first one here. I'm glad I didn't pre-order. That makes all the other systems feel like, meh, what's the point? I kind of get where you're coming from. If you really enjoy that level of interaction with your armies, then yeah, I mean, definitely I understand feeling so deflated that you don't really want the game anymore. If it is that important to you, then yeah. And I don't think it is unreasonable for these people to have expected to see this, because it is a part of the Paradox formula, and the only game that kind of bucks that trend is just fucking City Skylines. You can move your individual units in Stellaris, they're just your ships. You can move your individual regiments and divisions in Hearts of Iron. They just, like to have a frontline system as well. So, yeah, I don't think it's wrong to have expected that same formula to continue. On the same vein, I don't think... I totally understand people who are like, great, we're changing the system, and wow, that's brave, and I applaud that. Because I kind of feel that too, right? I don't agree with the change, but I do applaud Wiz for trying the change. Next up, if you're saying all you can do is assign your units to a front and then just make sure all our bars are 100%, then you've removed a large amount of the interest in war. True, but that we don't know that is the case. We don't know that is what is going to happen. Like, I remain quite firmly in the camp of we just don't know, so why are we making assumptions? And I kind of hope, like, I rewatched my video. I don't think I made assumptions about how it will work. So a lot of the comments that I got about me building strawmen to attack, I definitely do think they are incredibly unfair. There's a lot of people who kind of saw that I was negative and then just started rage typing, and I don't agree that that's fair, but whatever. YouTube comments do be YouTube commenting. Same guy again. I think my big issue is that it just feels like it's going to boil down to there's the best way to do this, and everything else is going to suck in comparison, because you don't have skill expression. If they make the game still feel like you have some sort of skill expression outside of just knowing when to press buttons, then sure. And this I do agree with. That's a big part of multiplayer especially. I think, for the most part, the people who I've seen most negative about this change have been multiplayer communities and multiplayer players. Not just for Vicky 2, but for other Paradox games as well. If you're interested in multiplayer at all, then I would imagine that this would be a negative for you, especially if you play on a more higher level, a competitive level. Because, yeah, removing manual control of armies is removing a part of skill expression. It's removing a part of, I am really good at this specific kind of combat. I have got a higher APM. I'm able to move my units faster to get them where they need to be, and I'm able to look around the map more and see that I need to move an army over here to reinforce over here. And there is a large amount of skill expression, right? Paradox games are not just about who has the bigger numbers. And even in one-sided wars, the one who is weaker can still win if they are a skilled player. It is a fact. And if there is no element of skill expression like that in the new warfare system, and I'm specifically talking about the warfare system, there's going to be skill expression throughout the game. Knowing what to build, knowing what to trade, all this kind of thing is going to be skill expression, but warfare itself needs skill expression as well. And if that is not present, then that is a big loss. We can't say for sure whether it is going to be present or not, because again, we just don't know anything about the game yet, which again is a big bloody problem. It is a big bloody problem. Ironically, this also means that they're alienating the other game's player bases. Every other game has units moving on a map. Be that map be space, or be that map, Earth. every other game does have units, and you move them around. I wouldn't say they're alienating, but they're certainly creating something different. Whether that alienates depends on how good this is. Some positives as well. I'm not just picking out the negatives. Couldn't be happier with myself. I hate Paradox Combat and how it feels exactly the same in almost all their games except in Hearts of Iron. It sounds vaguely as if it means land combat in Victoria 3 will work like naval combat in Hearts of Iron 4, but I'm speculating here. And this is exactly what I said frequently when One Proud Bavarian made his Crackpot theory video. I said, what you are describing sounds like the Hearts of Iron naval or air combat system. And yeah, I can see why, reading the dev diary and how fuck all information we got in it, I can see how people would see this as being the case. That combat is now Hearts of Iron-esque even. I can see that. It's something I thought myself, so I see that. I would like to see how it all works, honestly. I want to see how this combat system works, because we've had the same fucking war system for 15 fucking years, and everybody complains how all the games are the same. But when they try to make something new and interesting, everybody starts seething and crying immediately. I kind of get where you're coming from as well. Again, as much as I have not been positive about this change, it is something that I do applaud Wiz for trying. I think it is needed that innovation happens. The changes that Wiz made to Stellaris, both removing the other FTL modes and also the change that he did to the to how the planets were, those were really big changes to Stellaris and really shook up the game and made quite a lot of people mad. And now he's done it here. He does like shaking up the meta quite a bit, doesn't he? So I think having that level of bravery to do this is commendable, right? Because we can't just have the same game every 4 years or whatever. There does need to be a shakeup. So yeah, I more than any other comment that I've seen, this is the one that has like made me think the most about my own position. But yeah, it's definitely something I can agree with. Crackpot confirmed. Half of all Reddit pops gain +5 militancy. Yeah, sure. This is probably the boldest shit Paradox have pulled ever. I'm definitely looking forward to it, since unlike a lot of people here, I really don't like the Doomstack micro-type warfare that just dominates Paradox titles. I'll also suggest everyone to hold off both pitchforks and fireworks and see what the mechanics actually are before lambasting devs or praising them, although I can commend them for just the sheer boldness of the decision. 100%. Everything he said there is fucking great. I kind of do like Paradox Combat, and I don't agree that it is just Doomstack microtype. That's not what Paradox Combat is about. That's a very basic level understanding of it. But other than that, yeah, it is the boldest shit they've pulled. Telling people both to pull off with pitchforks and fireworks, that's remarkably, like, you know, cognizant. So, yeah, totally agree with this guy. New theory. We don't micromanage, but we do send strategies, which might mean directing a push along specific sets of provinces. Notice the wording here. What this means is that you do not move units directly on the map or make decisions about which exact unit should be initiating battles. It's not completely abstracted as the crackpots contend, it's simply out of the player's direct hands. So I disagree with this guy, because what he's coming up with here is the idea that units and all that still exist on the map and the AI is just going to control them. And we've already had that kind of, no, that's not how it's going to work, you know? If this is the way it works, I think it would work well. Sort of like Warfare in Hearts of Iron 4 without the micro of actually moving units along the front. I just hope it's not completely Crackpot where we lose all agency and just have to assign armies to fronts and hope for the best. Yeah, that would be bad. I don't think it's that. I don't think we're going to have units at all. I kind of want that for Navy, though. We'll see. I think it's a trade-off of agency and abstraction. The tactical level is out of our hands, but now we have to deal with all the strategic and politics consequences of our poor decisions. Pathfinder 4 basically ignores politics and war support and economics, but now we have to manage all of that. It might not simply be possible for one person to manage war, economy, and politics and micro all at once, which is why they made this decision. I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think that... I mean, if you think of the other Paradox games, right? When you're at war, your economy does take a back seat. You don't focus on building units where you should and constructing buildings and moving trade around and all this kind of stuff. That takes a back seat. Frequently, when I'm at war, if my economy is good, I will end the war with a huge pile of money because I've not been spending it as I've been working. So that is probably still going to be the case, regardless of which warfare system Victoria 3 went with. So it's not really a good argument. Because it isn't possible in other games to micro it all at once already. And EU4 has way more simple economics and politics and all of that. And it's still not possible there. So it's a bad argument. It's a bad argument. Moving on, next one. Started reading, read the first 3 pillars, and I wholeheartedly disagree with one of them. It's not a good start. Was it the second one? removing player control over units? I don't think that's what he meant, but he didn't clarify that I could see, so who knows. I share similar feelings, but removing it entirely went too far. It's also weirdly contradictory due to the removal of capitalist automation, but then the complete automation of warfare. Like, again, we don't know enough about how everything works to really state this confidently, but it is an interesting thing to bring up, right? It is more realistic this way, their warfare system, and that's something I said in my initial video as well, that one of the advantages of this system will be that it can be more realistic. So realism is definitely a focus, but at the same time, capitalists are controlled by the player, because otherwise it'd be too annoying or too irritating for the capitalists to build the wrong building. So players having control over capitalists is perfectly fine and reasonable, but not having control of the army is a bit of a contradiction. It is an interesting idea. In my opinion, having actual screenshots might have made it easier to immediately sell people on the system. Now we have to deal with this until at least next week. Again, I've said that multiple times. What this has done has just allowed people to sit and stew in their thoughts and theories about this new system for a week, be they building up an image of something absolutely amazing to then be disappointed by, or be completely doomer about it and hate the change and keep seething about it for a week. Of course, people aren't going to be thinking about it the entire week, but you know what I mean, right? This may have turned people off to the point where they won't watch or they won't read the next dev diary, and that is... I'm not going to keep going on about this. The way the dev diary was made was a mistake. Let's just move on. I love the attempt to innovate instead of sticking to the old problematic Vic 2 combat style. I think Vic 2 combat gets more criticism than it deserves. Completely agree. The main issues I see with it are the inability to automate your templates and the at times excessive micro. But neither of these seem like inherent issues to me. I think it's more... and I think I'd have preferred to have them just fix those. But I guess we'll see when they actually show us how war works. Even if you ignore the excessive micro, battles would turn into one province year-long meat grinders, not any depth of realism. The long meat grind battles only really started happening in the end game where entrenchment stats are high and everyone has machine guns. This would correspond to real-life World War I battles. For reference, Verdun lasted 9 months and the battles of the Isonzo lasted over 2 years. So in my opinion, it's not that unrealistic. Yeah, Victoria 2, out of all Paradox games, is the one that most realistically captures the era when it comes to combat. Evidently, it's well, potentially it is going to be dwarfed by Victoria 3 because reasons. But right now, it is absolutely the one that most captures the era. It very nicely portrays both Napoleonic style armies moving around combat and also World War I style Western Front trenches. And it's very interesting that it managed to do that without a change in mechanics. I think it's ingenious. It's phenomenal system. Just fucking hate generals and the lack of UI quality of life stuff. I really don't like this idea at all. Taking agency away from the player, especially in something as critical as warfare, seems destined to infuriate. If you want people to be able to automate some of this, why wouldn't you just make it an option rather than forcing it on people? And then they replied to that, I'm not 100% with this decision either, but this isn't automation. This is changing the layer in which you interact with warfare from operational to strategic. It's abstracting it away. To say it another way, less taking choice away and more giving the player a different set of choices to influence the action. There really was never a way to elegantly integrate both the old traditional tactical operation style of warfare and the new strategy-focused concept. Yeah, I mean, again, we don't know enough to know exactly how it's going to work, so we can't really say that it's not automation or that it is automation or anything of the sort, so again, both of these I feel are just building up images of what this system is in their mind and arguing for or against those. It's definitely not the right way to go about things. The rest sounds good, and he's talking about the pillars here of the dev diary, the 7 pillars. But I'm not excited about point number 2, because that's the only one that really had any information in it. It sounds like I'll have to wait until next week to see what warfare actually looks like, but I expect to miss moving actual armies around the map. Why do they add so many territories to the map if they aren't going to just be used for tactical maneuvering? This is the first major game decision that I'm not hyped for. Hopefully the other dev diaries can turn it around. I think it's a very fair comment. Very, very fair comment. Wiz has already responded to the need for the amount of provinces or territories or whatever you want to call them. We'll still need to learn exactly what it is all about and how they are used. But right now, all we know is that they're used. But yeah, I think it's very fair to say, yeah, I'm not very hyped for this thing, but we'll wait for the rest of them. Entirely fair comment. This is the most fair one. Could be okay. Could ruin the game. Who knows? Fair enough. Short, sweet, to the point. I like it. I'm cautiously... This one is actually from my YouTube comments. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think the system they're describing works well theoretically and addresses a lot of the gripes I have with the current Paradox formula for war. But I'm concerned this system is so radical that it almost definitely will produce mixed results when Vicky 3 is released. There's a lot I like about the system from the start. From the top of my head, the clearer focus on logistical aspects of war, which leans on the game's supposed strengths in representing the economies of the Victorian-era nations. This is something that we had as one of the pillars, that, you know, the logistics system is important, and we know that logistics are important from previous dev diaries as well. It addresses a lot of what I dislike about the current Paradox model for warfare, such as the excessive micromanagement needed to control your armies as your tag inevitably grows in size, and the AI's inability to perform well against a human. This is especially important for a game like Vicky 3, where it's possible that you'll be fighting an intercontinental war that requires focusing on multiple fronts. Yeah, no, that is entirely fair. When I've played Victoria 2, be it against players or be it against AI, focusing on multiple fronts is a pain in the ass. It really is. Often I just kind of say, fuck it, Africa can fall, I'm focusing on Europe or something to that effect, because it is a lot to manage when there are multiple fronts to control. So I totally understand that. That's perfectly fine. That being said, I share a lot of concerns with Lambert. Again, this is from my YouTube comments. The feasibility of the new system in multiplayer. It seems quite difficult to adequately represent player skill and its expression in a model like this, and I'm concerned that the experience of fighting in those huge set-piece battles in, say, late-game EU4 multiplayer won't be reflected. I can understand the concern that there is not going to be... Well, player expression, we know, came from being able to move units around. So the worry that player expression is not going to be replaced is a valid one, right? It is a valid one. It's not one of these fucking hypothetical pie in the sky, I've created a fucking image in my head. That's not that. It is something that we know for sure. Units won't be able to move around. And the worry that the things that gives the other Paradox games won't be replicated elsewhere or won't be replaced elsewhere. That's not something to... that's not another one of these comments where I'm going to trash, right? It's just not. The ability for a player to engage with the system. In other words, is there enough stuff to do during war that might help in gaining an edge over your opponent, or is it essentially just a spectacle of watching two fronts bashing into one another, hoping that you're prepared well enough beforehand? If a war's outcome can't be significantly influenced during the war, then it will remove a lot of what is most interesting about war in Paradox games, since players can just predict how wars will end. It would make small countries especially a chore at best to play, given that you'd be helpless against your larger foes. And with this, these are not... the new system is bad because this. This is... I'm worried that this, like, I'm worried, or I have a concern that if this is the case, then bad. And I think that's fair. This isn't the same as the others. And I'm sure somebody will call me a hypocrite here because I agree with this. Maybe that is the case. I don't agree with you either. But whatever. Yeah. I hope that there is a focus on war enough such that it is something that you need to pay attention to and you need to work on and you need to interact with on a daily basis in-game. Or maybe not a daily basis, but something equivalent to what we had in previous games. Because I kind of feel that it needs to be. But yeah, Cat of Horrors here is very much in the wait-and-see attitude. The system has the potential to far exceed the limited potential of the current Paradox Warfare model, but it must remain interactive enough during wartime so that players can't simply predict a war's outcome from the very start. Yep, fully agree. Another one from my comments here. I appreciate your honesty, and even though I personally don't have strong feelings one way or the other, I'd like to address a certain point. As someone who almost exclusively plays Paradox's grand strategy games in single player, aka a member of the vast majority, yes, I totally agree, that is the vast majority. 100% single player is the majority. No argument there. There's not a single instance in which I find microing my troops around particularly engaging. Cheesing the AI just isn't cool. I'd argue that, for example, we need to include micro in CK3 as it's a long-standing root or pillar, as you said, of the studio has done. It's done the game more harm than good because it's a very clear afterthought with very little depth involved, and any of the processes leading up to, during, and after combat, especially because CK3 isn't charitable enough to allow me to give my armies AI orders like in Imperta. That's fair. CK3's combat is pretty shit. I'm not going to argue with that. It's pretty shit. It's occasionally nice when you've got a character as one of the things, one of the leaders, one of the marshals, I can't remember what they're called, knights, I guess, and you see that they've killed like 20 people. Like, that's a pretty hype moment, but like otherwise, the actual mechanics behind it, yeah, it's pretty shit. I understand that this position might be confusing or mind-blowing to people who predominantly enjoy these games on a multiplayer basis. I totally get and can appreciate how micro takes on a completely different dimension in that scenario, especially if you're coming from, let's say, a very active Hearts of Iron 4 multiplayer community. Yeah, I don't know much about Hearts of Iron or the Hearts of Iron community, other than it's pretty toxic, but yeah, the multiplayer community is active and all that. And yeah, I mean, I have experience in multiplayer in Imperata, in and EU4 primarily. And as I said in the Dev Diary video itself, the feeling of adrenaline, that kick to the gut, the heart racing, pounding, sweaty, all that kind of thing, it is a huge adrenaline rush to be in warfare, and I don't get that from single player. I never have got that from single player. I think the new system will fail if I don't get that same feeling from multiplayer that I do in other games. Because the people who enjoy multiplayer, and yeah, they are the minority, But they enjoy it because, like, primarily because of that fucking adrenaline rush. Because that's the big difference, right? That's the big difference between single player and multiplayer, is that adrenaline. So yeah, I mean, I really, really hope that Vicky 3 has something on that level. The fact that all Paradox games are at their core war games and map painters, and that Vicky 3 is trying to move away from that after the X iteration of the same system, makes me willing to accept a very different spin on the formula. Could it be that their new model turns out to be an absolute disaster? Absolutely, but I'm willing to give it a shot, and I'm happy that the devs seem a little more ambitious too. Agreed. I mean, yeah, it is an ambitious change, and that should be applauded, that they are brave enough to do such a thing. Yes. You know, the interesting thing is, if somebody had asked me, do I want to see a Paradox game without this method of combat and something radically different, I'd have probably said yes. And it's just because it's this one that I've been excited for that I'm against it. I'm going to have to really evaluate my thoughts. I'm going to have to really dig deep and, like, think. Because, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there are thoughts that I need. Yeah, there are thoughts I need to think about. Evaluate my position, kind of thing. I'm just as anxious as you and everyone else is, and I've been waiting for this game forever, and perhaps it might be better to play it safe, but I'm willing to give the devs, and especially Wiz, the benefit of the doubt on this. Best wishes. Yeah, no, it's an entirely fair comment. It's an entirely fair comment. We have more. Look at the reaction online. The most common attitudes I see towards this seem to be of cautious optimism, so I don't know if crackpots are as much of a minority as you say. Yeah, I said that at the start of the video. I was wrong, and apparently there are more people who enjoy this change than dislike it. But then here, I think people who weren't for it are talking about it. Oh, sorry, aren't talking about it anymore and just left. And the people who wanted it this way are celebrating right now, so they're most vocal. Because it's how it's going right now is, if somebody even mentions that they're not a fan of how it's turned out, then they get swarmed by people who wanted it this way. Why even talk about it if no one will give you the time of day to try and get some mutual understanding? Right now it basically devolved into, haha, you're stupid for not wanting this, we win. I have seen that. I've seen that in my own fucking video. It's not my most disliked video ever, but the percentage is in the red, because, yeah, people they saw that I am against the change and disliked the video. I've had people, I've seen, well, not to me directly, but I've seen people very much vitriolic in their gloating, and I can totally see why people may not want to interact when that is the kind of sycophantic bullshit that you're going to be experiencing. So I totally get that. I'm not saying every person who likes this change is a sycophant. I'm not saying that every person who likes this change is a fanboy. I'm not saying that. Please stop saying that I said that, because I fucking didn't. But yeah, there are a few of them, and they are the most vocal and the most aggressively happy, and it's not fun to interact with those people. Yeah, just moving on. I honestly think that somebody up in Paradox told One Proud Bavarian what they wanted Warfare to be off the record, and that's why he came up with this theory video in the first place. And then I was thinking the same with Paradox's blessing, of course, to soften the blow. This is a conspiracy theory that I've seen floating around quite a lot. Quite, like, a lot. Very much a lot. It's not true. At least, like, I'm 99% is not true. Because obviously he's not spot on in his video. It is believable though. This is a conspiracy theory that isn't true, but it is very believable. And if somebody didn't know who Paradox or One Proud Bavarian were, and you said somebody guessed that a radical change to a game was coming 6 months or whatever before said change came, said person is very tight with Paradox, I think is the most fair way to put it. Has been contracted by Paradox to do various things for CK3, for example. And they came up with this system that turned out to be, for the most part, true. It is very believable to think, oh, well, they've told him, and he's made a video about it. The idea to soften the blow, I think that is the most unrealistic part. But I can honestly totally empathize with the people who are legitimately thinking that he was told beforehand. What can I say? It's believable. So I don't think it's true, but it is believable. Another post. The fact that Victoria 3 will attempt to represent the true cost of warfare makes me think that it'll be Paradox's best atrocity simulator. Oh joy. The most satisfying part of EU4 for me is when an enemy declares war on you and you slowly turn back the tide, crushing the life out of your opponent like a giant jungle snake crushes a deer. Watching with vindictive satisfaction as your own people start to call for peace and you inflict a ruinous settlement, crippling your broken opponent and forcing them into decades of turmoil while they'll struggle to control the rebellions that will surely break out. This guy's on a list. This guy's on a list. The fact that Victoria 3 will represent the dependence that war creates opens up a whole new dimension of strategic cruelty. Rather than making an abstract devastation meter tick upwards, you'll be able to see all the widows and orphans who are now a drain on your enemy's economy. I dare say that you'll be able to make life so miserable for your enemy's citizenry that they'll be willing to migrate to your lands and work in your factories. This guy's definitely on a list. Crusader Kings will still have more personal scale atrocities, and Stellaris will still have larger scale atrocities, but in my opinion, the economic simulation of Victoria 3 will provide the most tangible and relatable war crimes. This guy's on a fucking list. Another post. Anyone else feel it's strange how the community has suddenly done a 180 on the Crackpot theory? Yeah, I fucking do. Before, people were saying it's stupid and would never happen. Yeah, no, there was a period of a couple of weeks, a few months ago, where the Crackpot theory was being discussed every day, and there were thread after thread after thread after thread about the Crackpot theory, and the vast majority were against it. The vast majority were saying it was a dumb decision, it would never happen, that I would hate the game if it was like this. The Crackpot theory, before Thursday, was not liked, which is why I am so surprised that the response to the dev diary has been as positive as it is, because I have seen far more than 220 whatever people be against the change. I do not understand where the positives have come from or where the negatives have gone. Before, people were saying it's stupid and would never happen. Now everyone's claiming it's a great decision, and anyone who complains is just a toxic fanboy. It's really weird. It is very fucking weird. Don't know where that's come from. But that is the end, finally, of the comments. An hour and 20 minutes of comments. It was a big dev diary. It really, really was a big dev diary, and, well, like I said, it's been about 30 hours since the dev diary was posted, and there are 62 pages of comments in 30 hours. There has been a response to this dev diary. The thread was also locked like 2 or 3 times during that time to let the let the moderators catch up, and then unlocked again so people can continue their arguments. But yeah, there has been a response. It's 62 pages. There has been a lot of comments, and I've read out some of them. I haven't read all 62 pages. I'm not suicidal. I would like to not be suicidal. Massive props to the moderators and the community team for being able to withstand this. Although, again, there's less backlash than I would have expected. Still, there's been a lot of lash, front or backlash, whatever. There's been a lot of lash. But yeah, those are the comments that I've read and I thought interesting enough to share with you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like button, subscribe, because I'm going to go over Victoria 3 more. Even though I wasn't in favor of this change, I'm still going to be into Victoria 3. So, yeah, thanks all for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.